one of the things that, if you guys remember, the very beginning of the course, I took you guys back to the plasma membrane, because the plasma membrane is where everything is going to happen, okay? So throughout the course, as we've talked about our topics, I've always tried to get you guys to thinking at the level of a tissue, and then the cells that would be located in that tissue. Is that correct? Okay. And one of the things that I've tried to continuously mention is how we're going to have extra cellular fluid, meaning the fluid around the cells, and our intracellular fluid in the cell itself. And then we would draw our little capillary bed and the blood flow and all that sort of stuff, okay? Chapter 24 is trying to bring all of this together for you, because one of the things about this chapter, the first thing that it starts out with is fluid balance. And it's letting you know that we consider the body to have 3 major fluid compartments. All right? We've got that extracellular fluid. We've got intracellular fluid. We've got the blood. Now remember, for humans, okay, for humans, we need to make sure that our cells remain in an isotonic condition, meaning that whatever the concentrations of those electrolytes are, that extracellular, intracellular, and the blood are isotonic. We are dependent on movement of water to help maintain that. Okay? That good old osmosis. So your textbook, the reason I left this up is because it lets you know the fluid compartments. It's once again trying to represent what I've tried, what I've tried to represent for the whole session. And we are dependent on this process of osmosis. So it's got a little video, and I thought we would just kind of pay attention to that little video. Now, let's see if we can get it to play.
Diffusion is the net movement of molecules down a concentration gradient. This process allows small molecules, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, to cross the plasma membrane. Most polar molecules, such as sugars and proteins, cannot freely cross this lipid membrane. Although water molecules are polar, they are small enough to pass through the membrane freely. This special case of diffusion that involves the movement of water molecules across a membrane is called osmosis. If a molecule, such as urea, is added to one side of a membrane, it will not be able to diffuse across the membrane because it is both large and polar. Because of its polar nature, it will interact with other polar molecules, such as the water. This interaction reduces the number of free water molecules on the right-hand side. With fewer free water molecules on the right-hand side, there is now a net movement of water molecules down their concentration gradient to the side with the urea molecules. Because more water molecules are moving into this area than are leaving, the water level on the right side will rise. If the osmotic concentrations of two solutions are equal, the solutions are isotonic. However, when the solutions have unequal osmotic concentrations, the solution with the higher concentration of solutes is hypertonic, and the solution with the lower concentration of solutes is hypotonic.
Now, a couple of things. First of all, they used urea, which is what? Based on what we learned from chapter 23.
Precursor to urine.
It's a nitrogenous waste. Water balance in the body has to begin at the glomeruli, which are part of the nephron of the body, making our kidneys very important in fluid balance. In the body as a whole, one of the things that you're going to encounter when you get into your chosen programs, you're going to encounter patients who are going to need IVs, who are going to need fluid therapy. And what this chapter tries to do is give you information about the situations and the best way, or a better understanding of what can lead to this particular problem, what the effects might be. You all have to begin to address it. So, just to give you, a little bit of information about balancing the fluid. When this says fluids properly distributed, this means in the cell itself, in the extracellular fluid, and in the blood, in the entire body as a whole. Under most circumstances, we are addressing the fluid balance by intake of water and our diet. And that hopefully meets our input and output of the water that we need. So the way that we work, or the way that the body will work, in our hypothalamus, we have something called osmoreceptors. They respond to angiotensin II. Do you guys happen to remember where we've mentioned that? The raw and the lungs, okay? And that was in our last chapter, the part with the kidneys, okay? Because here's what's one of the things that'll happen. The lungs and the kidneys will work to balance pH, okay? And that, of course, comes down to having to affect other parts of the body, including fluid. So, it'll respond to angiotensin II, and then any rise of osmolarity in the extracellular fluid. What is the difference between osmosis and osmolarity?
Osmolarity is the concentration
Of what?
of the water molecules, the urea or molecules.
And don't forget our electrolytes.
And then
Okay? And then osmosis.
passing, which is the mechanism of passing
Of what?
of the water across the pressure, the concentration gradient.
Of the water. So that tells me that the concentration of the salts, okay, both inside and outside the cell, as well as in the blood, which kind of comes along with it, okay, are going to have an effect on my fluid balance. Now, most of the time, the one that has the biggest effect is sodium. Why? water follows sodium, which we just learned in Chapter 23. However, in true dehydration, what? Why do I have that bolded?
True dehydration,
Well, both of those are going to be different. And dehydration, okay?
over-concentrated with the other molecules and electrolytes with not enough water.
And under most circumstances, the majority of us every day are dehydrated. Do you get thirsty? Okay. What do you use to try to quench that thirst?
Coffee.
It's really interesting because water itself may or may not quench the thirst. It's going to be based on what is that electrolyte balance. But under most circumstances, every day, we're dehydrated. True dehydration, that's going to probably put you in the hospital. All right? Certain situations, certain illnesses, whatever the case might be. True dehydration, that blood volume has declined, as well as a rise in the sodium has occurred, and these are going to have physical effects. Physical effects that you may or may not be able to address just simply at home. We're going to see the difference in a second. So what will happen is ADH, antidiuretic hormone, will get released. That means we're going to urinate less, we're going to increase our blood volume, and it becomes a negative feedback loop in the hopes that we are going to correct this problem in the body. When we have a fluid imbalance, and that word sometimes I just think it should be imbalance, but anyway, imbalance. There is an abnormal total volume water in all compartments of the body. Concentration or distribution of the water among everywhere in the body. One type, and you will see this, okay? And it's going to be important for you to know the difference between hypovolemia. Have you all heard of that? Okay. You may have heard of hypovolemic shock. All right. Why, Brian?
Blood loss.
And what can it lead to?
Death.
Death. Okay. There is a difference between hypovolemia and true dehydration. It's going to be your responsibility as the caregiver to know the difference, because treatment is different. In hypovolemia, about 10 to 20% of the blood volume has been lost. It can basically occur in times of like a hemorrhage, wound, okay, severe burns, people who are going to have second and third degree burns most likely, chronic vomiting, or diarrhea. These are the major causes that lead to hypovolemia. When we have this imbalance, okay, basically water and sodium have been lost. and there has been no